Welcome! In this video we will look at adding and manipulating a date control on a form with the PowerBasic Windows Compiler. This is the application we had at the end of the last video. What we're going to do today is we're going to add another toolbar button to allow us to view a form on which we will put a couple of date controls. So the first thing to do is to have a look at the beginning of our code where we pick up the icons. We're going to add a new icon. So we've added a new resource icon, dates.ico, and while we're in here we're going to do some tidying up of the constants we're using further up the program. Now our rich edit control, I'm going to amend its number. This is a number that the program uses internally to keep track of it, and we're going to put some constants in for our toolbar events and take them away from the control of PB forms. The reason for this is when you do go into PB forms and actually start to move things around, if you've actually built any additional functionality outside of PB forms, you risk actually losing that. So we're going to separate the toolbar constants from PB forms completely. And we'll take the build and help ones. In fact, we'll take them out completely. And we're going to give them a new range of numbers. And since we're going to be adding a new toolbar event for the new dates button we're going to be adding, we'll create a new constant for that while we're in here. Right, okay. Right, that's fine. Okay, next thing to do then. In our create toolbar function, this is where the icons for the toolbar are actually added to the image list. What we have in here at the moment are two icons, one for build and one for help. Now we're going to add a new one to our image list for the dates icon. Right, so that's our third icon added to the image list, and having added it to the image list, the other thing we're also going to do is we're going to take away this hash PB forms part at the beginning, because we want to remove the creation of the toolbar from under the control of PB forms. So we're going to take these out completely so that PB forms knows nothing about these. So we've got our three icons lined up. Having lined up our icons, we now have to add our icons to the toolbar. Now we've added the build one, we've added the help one, we've got a separator between them. So before the separator we're going to add in a new icon, and this icon is going to be specifically for our dates. And in here we're putting in the event handler constant for dates. Now the number in here is the ordinal number of the icon in the image list. Now since this is the third icon we've added, it should be a number 3 in here. Now we try running that as is just to make sure we've not syntactically made any mistakes. And display it on screen, and there we do indeed have a new test dates button. It doesn't do anything at the moment because we haven't put anything in for an event handler, but the button's there quite happily. Everything else still functions. Build report gives us a report, and help we haven't done in for yet. So we have a new button. So let's go to the event handler and actually put an event in to handle the clicking of it. Now if we look down here, this is where we put in the event handler for our build report button. So what we want to do now is to add in a suitable event to handle that. So there's the constant we're using, and just like any other button on the screen, we want to put an if statement in to detect the fact the button has indeed been clicked. And in here we're going to do a call to a new form. Now, to create our new form, we go into PowerBasic Forms, and in here it will show you the last form it's actually done. There is only one form on this thing. So what we want to do, we want to go up to the toolbar in here and click on New Dialog. And this is where we're going to create our new dialog. Now, over on our toolkit, we have a date time picker control. Now, what we're after is a couple of these. Now, you'll see it defaults to the current date in the control. So, since we want the form to appear on screen, we will give the form a suitable name. And we will call it Test Dialogs. Now we'll want this to be centered on the screen, so we go into the styles and pick center, and we'll also want a caption and sys menu on it. The sys menu is an important one because it gives you the close X button in the title bar, which is quite useful. Now in addition to those, we will want a button on screen, because what we want to do, having put the date controls, we want to actually allow us to see what value are in the date controls. So we'll call this show dates, and we'll just give it the standard ID OK value. So if we open up the date control and look at its properties, the first thing we want to do is we'll want to give it a reasonable name, so we'll call that one start date. In the styles we have a number of options for what kind of date we're actually going to be getting. Now it defaults to the short date format, which is in the American format, which is the month, day, year, short year. We're looking for the short date century. This gives us a 4-digit year, typically month, day, year. Now, the display of any date in the system is driven by your regional settings. So if you're in the UK, your date format will be day, month, year. So the short date century format is the one we're actually after. And we'll do exactly the same with this one. We will change its style to short date century format, and we will change its name, its handle rather, to end date. So we're going to have a start date and an end date on the screen. So just to indicate to the user what we're actually doing, we'll create a couple of labels to sit above, and we will call this enter start date, and we will highlight its color as blue, and we will create another one. In fact, we'll just clone this one, saves us setting the color, and we'll call this end date. So there we have our screen. A start date, an end date, and a button whose task it is to show us the end dates. We can do a quick test on it to make sure it looks okay, and we'll see that the dates function quite nicely. They allow you to drill down, pick a date. You get a lot of functionality out of these date controls. It gives you an easy way of allowing the user to key a date, but not put in invalid dates. So it saves you having to code any validation routines. So that looks fine, so we'll save that, and we will go back to our original code. There we go. So we try running our program now. It should still run quite happily. Yes, it does. Now all we need to do now is to link the event behind the test dates toolbar button with our new form. So if we have a look on our F2, we can see our show dialog test dates form is appearing quite happily. So we'll copy that. We will get into the event handler in our main dialog, and down here where we'd put in the event handler for the toolbar dates, we will paste in the name of the function which shows the test dates, and the parameter it wants is the handle to the dialog we're currently in, which is CB handle. So if we run that now and click on our test dates button, our new test dialog comes up, and again you can quite happily nip in, change the date, now the show dates button at the moment, all it does is closes the form. We want to do something a wee bit different on that. We want to display what dates the user's picked. So we have a look at the event handler of our new form. Again, similar to all the other ones you've actually seen, all it does at the moment is when the OK button is actually clicked, it ends the dialog, which in this case is not the functionality we're looking for. What we might want to do is, on some forms that you design, you may not want the date to default to the current date. It may be pulling information out of a database. It may be setting some date based on some algorithm you set up. So you want a way of actually setting dates. And this is our next task. So in here, if we wish to set a date, so there's some things in here we want to actually do. Now there are no variables set up inside this event handler, this callback function at the moment. So we're going to set some variables up to actually support what we're going to attempt to do. Now, one of the bonuses of this is we're going to set up a static local variable. In fact, two of them. Now, the static local variable has the advantage in that once the value of str start date is actually set, every time this function is called, it will remember the value that was in str start date. So effectively the value becomes quite static. In other functions, just a normal local variable would be effectively reinitialized every time you called the function. So the beauty of this is we can actually set the value of start date, come back later in some other event, and the value will still be there. Now, there are two other variables we want to set up. So these are going to be both pointers, which are going to be used for handling our notifications and what comes back when someone actually changes a date on screen. But first, before we do any of that, we want to set the initial value of a start date. Now, if we're going to set the initial start date, for example, to the 25th of December 2019, we need a way of actually doing that. Now, what we're going to assume is not that the date controls are always going to have the current date, which they will do by default, but we'll want to set both of them. Now, we're going to create a couple of new functions in here to handle our dates. Now, what you can do in PowerBasic, if you want the American date format, that's all you need to do. Date dollar will contain the American date format. What I'm going to do for those of us in the UK is I'm going to create a little function called funUKDate, which will return the date dollar in a UK format. So first thing to do is we will bookmark where we are. We'll toggle our bookmark on so we can always pop back here. We'll jump to the end and we're going to create a new function to return the UK date. Now this is going to use our string handling commands, the mid $, left $, and right $. Mid $, will get the middle part of the American formatted date, which is in fact the day. The left $, will take the two leftmost characters, which in this case is the month. And right $, will take the last four characters of the date $, which is in fact the year. So this simple little function will actually chop up the date $, returned by PowerBasic itself, and give us a UK date format. So if we do a Control B, it allows us to jump back to our bookmark. Nice easy way to jump around the program. Having set the dates in here, having set the dates in our static variables, start date and end date, we now want to set the two date controls on the screen to have those values. And we're going to create a new function to set the date inside the date control. Now we're going to have to pass some parameters to this function. First being the handle of the form we're actually on, CB handle. We're going to have to pass the handle of the date control itself. And we'll have to pass the value we wish to set in that date control. And we want to do exactly the same for the end date. So let's create this new function. Now if you're going to be using dates that aren't UK format, you may have to change this function to handle the dates in the format that you're actually using. So again, we're going to have two local variables. First one is going to access a user-defined type, which the API controls actually handle for you, or have created for you. Now what we're doing here is we're using the control handle command that basically takes the handle of our dialog control and turns it into a Windows handle. Windows handles are unique across the entire Windows system. Now we'll just set up the variables we're bringing in. So we're giving in the handle of the dialog, we're giving in the handle of the date control on the dialog, and we're giving in the date we wish to be set within that date control. So our control handle will then take our dialog, our date control handle, and turn it into a Windows unique handle. Then what we're going to do is we're going to use the user-defined type DT we set up a moment ago. First of all, to set the month, being the fourth character for two characters. We're picking up the day number. And finally we're picking up the year. Get our brackets in line. And then having set that up, we're going to return the value of this Windows API call we're about to make. The date time set system time, and we're going to pass it the Windows handle, and we're going to use one of the constants, GDT valid, and we also pass the DT user-defined type we've prepared earlier. Now what this should do is we're giving it three parameters, the dialog, the control on the dialog, the value, we're preparing our user-defined type with the month, day and year, and we're passing all of that to a Windows API call whose job it is to then populate that control. So if we've done this correctly, if we try running our program now, no we haven't. What have we done? We haven't set up the equates. I thought we'd done that. Right, let's double check. What did we set these equates to be? Start date and end date. Okay, why is it not doing that? Ah, we missed out the underline. There we go, let's try that now. Nope. Oh yes, misspelling. We'll get there. And we're running now. Right, okay. So if we go into our test dates now, if we've done this correctly, the start date should be set to the 25th of December, which is indeed. It sets to 25th of December and the end date is set to today's date. Perfect. So having proved we can actually set the value within the control, what we want to do now is we want to read the value that's actually in the control by the time we hit the show dates button, because although these are the dates that we've populated for the user to see, the user may go in and then change the dates. They may decide they wish a different date, and we want to pick up the fact of whatever date they've actually picked when we hit the show dates button. So how do we do that? Well, if we have a look at our event handler for our dates, we've put in these two pointers. Now these are going to be used as a notification, so we can actually pick up when the user changes the control, and we're going to set the value of str start date and end date accordingly. So as you remember from previous videos, this involves setting up a new event handler to handle notifications. WM notify. Now in this we're going to be using the header pointer we set up, and this is going to be picking up the callbacks lower parameter. As so. And then after that, because we do have more than one control on the screen, we want to actually determine which control the user has actually selected and done something on. So we test, not that bit, so we test on the pointer to see which one has actually been clicked on. So, which one has been clicked on? There are only two controls on the screen, start date and end date. So what we'll do is we'll create two case statements, one to handle one to handle the other. So we're determining where the notifications come from. We know it's going to be either the start date or the end date. Now if it is the start date, we then want to check to see what's actually changed. In this case it's a date time change, and we're using our other pointer to pick up the callback lower parameter again, and in here what we're going to do is we're going to use this to set the start date. Now, the start date we're going to set, I'll go through this slowly so we can actually understand what's happening here. We're using the pointer to pick up the day number. Now, since that's a number, we'll want that in a string format because we're putting it into a string. So if we put format dollar around that, it's going to give us the day number as a string. Now if it happens to be the first of the month, it'll just be a single character 1. Now we want to zero fill them, so the easy thing to do is to add on a couple of zeros to the beginning, and we'll use the $$ command to take the 2 rightmost characters. So if the day number happens to be 1, we're adding on 2 zeros, so it'll be 001. We're taking the 2 rightmost characters, so it'll be 01. If the date happens to be 25, we add on 2 zeros, so it's 0025. We take the 2 rightmost, and you end up with 25. So basically, you're zero filling the front of the date. Now, having done that, we want to add on our slash, because we want this in the standard date format. And what we're going to do now is we're going to do exactly the same thing to get the month. And in this case, rather than W day, it's W month. And again, we fold on to our next line, get our slash character in place. And for the year, since the year is going to be 4 characters anyway, we don't have any problems with zeros. It's a straightforward format of the pointer to the information we're after, and in this case, rather than W month, it's W year. So what this should do is when the user clicks on a date control, the notification will kick in that that's been done. We will pick up to see where the notification has come from, in this case the start date. We will determine whether it's a date time change, if they have changed the date. If they have changed the date, then we're quite happy. We will pick up the value of the pointer to the date control. For the day, the month and the year, we will populate it into start date, which is a static variable which will hold that value until the form actually terminates. Now, we will have exactly the same logic to do for the end date. So since we put a select statement in there, we'll have to end the select statement. Don't want any errors. And then what we'll do is we'll copy this section of code, and we will go down to the end date. And what we will do in here is change the variable we're putting it into to end date. So this should quite happily accept our information. Now what we want to do when the user actually hits the OK button, we want to pick up the value that's in those. Now that's going to be quite easy since we've actually captured every change to the date control into the start and end date variables. So all we really need is a straightforward message box. And we're just going to display the start date and its value. And then on the second line of the message box, display the message box. So let's try that and see if we've made any errors. Yes, we have. What have we missed? Yes, I've missed a bracket. I've missed a bracket in all of them. Because the right dollar needs a bracket at the end. Right, let's try that now. And it's running. Okay, so we're going to test dates. Now we've already got the 25th in there, so let's change that to the 26th. And let's change our end date. We'll nip in and we'll go in for some time in 2020. Let's say October the 6th. And we'll hit show dates. And there indeed it has picked up the new values. The 26th of the 12th for the start date and the 6th of October 2020. So just to show that wasn't a fluke, we'll nip in, we'll change that to the 16th. The date control is quite handy, you can actually change them individually. But if you're tempted to put in sort of the 32nd, it wouldn't do it. It only takes valid dates. And then show the dates again, and it has indeed picked up. So this dialog demonstrates that you can display two date controls on the screen. You can preemptively set the value in those dates using a new function. You can then pick up when a button's clicked what the value in those dates actually are, which are held in our static variables, and they can be used elsewhere in your program, either to be passed on to some other function. They don't have to be displayed on screen, but they can be used to drive the information that appears on your screen. So that completes today's demonstration of setting date controls on screen. Thank you for watching.